There is a Chinese phrase called 傻大个. It's quite vivid if you understand the meaning of it. It usually describes someone who is physically tall or big, but seems a bit of simple-minded, naive, or clumsy, you can say. And it's often used with a tone of endearment or teasing instead of a harsh insult. And there's no direct equivalent translation in English. A gentle giant is probably the closest I can come up with. And I'm pretty sure we have all come across someone fitting in this description in some stage of life, right? They could be your schoolmates, your relatives, or someone you see in your neighborhood every now and then but never suspect a thing. Because a persona like this always disarms us, lowering our defenses. We always believe people like this, they're just a little bit eccentric. They don't carry evil intentions, right? And back in the early 1970s, a local resident living in Santa Cruz, California, perfectly fit this description to a T. His name is EdmundKemper, standing at a staggering 6 feet 9 inches tall, weighed 300 pounds, and wore thick glasses. And he was a soft-spoken, exceedingly courteous man who seems a little bit out of place for his massive frame. With that physique, he was highly noticeable, yet never posed any threat to the local residents, and as a matter of fact, people adored him every time they see him on the street. Hey Ed, how are you? How's it going? But during the exact same window of time, young female college students were disappearing one after another from a nearby university campus. The police have launched large-scale manhunts, and the locals were desperate to track down this ruthless culprit. But every lead led to a dead end, while new victims continued to emerge every single week. No one knew who was the killer until a sudden phone call sent shockwaves through the entire town. Today's killer we're gonna talk about is one of the notorious serial killers in history from the United States, and for decades, the FBI and the forensic scientists have extensively studied his modus operandi, criminal motivations, and ideologies, and they have long used his case as a key reference framework to analyze and evaluate other criminals. But before we get into today's case, I'm gonna do a disclaimer. I don't even know when was the last time I did my disclaimer. The following content may contain necrophiliac activities, animal abuse, and graphic details on murder scenes that may be harmful or distressing to some audience. Everything is for entertaining, educational purposes, and to raise awareness. If these topics proven to be too overwhelming for you, don't be hesitant to pause the video, take a breather, and go watch something positive to lift your spirits. You're always welcome to watch this video on another day, because your mental health is very important. Viewer discretion is advised. Meet EdmundKemper. He was born on December 18th, 1948 in Burbank, California, and he was the middle child of 3. His parents were strict disciplinarians, and after the divorce from his parents in 1957, he moved with his mother and 2 sisters. That marked him as 10 years old. As a kid, Ed showed signs of pathology. He developed those dark, violent fantasies early on, such as cutting off the heads of his sister's dolls and killing animals. He killed both of the family's cats. He buried one of the cats alive, later decapitated it. And he liked to play games with his sister. His favorite games were electric chair and gas chamber, where he would pretend to be dead in a very horrible way. Okay. He once even stalked his 2nd grade teacher with his father's bayonet, and after his sister Susan found out about this, Susan was teasing him. She was like, "Why did you stalk her? You like her? Why don't you just kiss her then?" Then Ed responded saying, "If I kissed her, I'd have to kill her first." So, growing up, Ed had a difficult relationship with his mother, who was punitive and verbally abusive. Her name was Clarnell Elizabeth Kemper, who was an alcoholic and putatively suffering from borderline personality disorder. And his father, they shared the same name, by the way, EdmundKemper II. He was a military veteran. He worked as an electrician after World War II. So, their marriage was filled with constant fights and bickering because Clarnell always belittled her husband. She thought of being an electrician as an unworthy, unskilled occupation. Really? I think electrician needs a lot of skills. I mean, obviously, I couldn't do it. If I touch the wire, bitch, Final Destination coming up this summer. And another thing about Clarnell is, I don't know why, she just hated Ed for some inexplicable reason. She just hated his ass, and he refused to show any affection to him because she believed that being nice to her son will turn him gay. Ed's father once said, and I quote, "Suicide missions in wartime and the later atomic bomb testing were nothing compared to living with Clarnell." At the age of 14, he fed up. He was like, you know what? I can deal with the bullshit no more, the fuck. So he left his mother to seek his father's help, but it was rejected because his father had already remarried and started a new family at that point. Instead, he was sent to live with his paternal grandparents on a remote farm. After living with them for a while, Ed realized that his grandmother was just as domineering as his mother. He left his mother to escape, as if he ended up living with another older version of his mother all over again. And he really hated her, because this is how he described his grandmother in later interviews. He said, "She thought she had more balls than any man, and she was constantly emasculating me and my grandfather to prove it." After this constant put-downs from his grandmother, he became angrier and angrier. He said, "I couldn't please her. It was like being in jail. I became a walking time bomb, and I finally blew." On August 27, 1964, Ed got into another explosive argument with his grandmother, but this time, instead of holding down his anger, he showed no mercy. He shot and killed his grandmother with a .22 caliber rifle. He also shot and killed his grandfather when he walked up to the driveway to prevent him of finding out his wife dying. So his grandfather was just a collateral damage. He was like, "Grandpa, you weren't supposed to be here." He later explained he just wanted to see what it feels like to kill grandma. So that's how he killed both of his grandparents. And after he killed them, he called his mom. And Clarnell told him, "You need to go to the police." She was like, "Why are you calling me? You think I'm gonna come over and help you clean the bodies? No." Here's the intriguing part of the entire case. Every time he got taken into custody or apprehension, he voluntarily reported his own action to the police. Ed was a minor when he got arrested, and due to the severity of this case, the authorities were thinking about infinity term. They were trying to figure out if there's a way to try him as an adult, but eventually they couldn't. So he got sent into the criminally insane unit of Atascadero State Hospital, which was maximum security at the time for all the mentally ill and other notorious criminals. He was then got diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, as well as a very impressive IQ of 145. Yeah, nothing is worse than when serial killers have high IQs. You know, scientists with high IQs, they change the world. But when serial killers with high IQs, So that hospital was a complete shit show with 1,600 patients, including dozens of murderers and 800 plus sex offenders. And there was only about 10 psychology staffs. While Ed was there, he became a trusted assistant to the psychologist, which means he had access to records and psychological evaluation reports, which contained confirmational details of crime-related information. And let me break it down to you if you don't know what this means. So he was still a minor at this point, right? Someone who never properly received sex education and is now being locked with 800 sex offenders. So he already had that demented, twisted, dark sexual fantasies. And now with that influence, this is like pouring gasoline onto an open wildfire. Thanks to his exceptionally high IQ, talking to medical professionals felt like solving 1 + 1 = 2. So he completely convinced the doctors, the psychologists, he's cured. They were like, "Oh, Ed, you're cured. Yeah, you can go now." So he got released. So he was only in that facility for a couple of years, and he was released on his 21st birthday in 1969. And after he got out, he moved back with his mother. From a young age, Ed had always been fascinated about the law enforcement. He just had this fixation of becoming a cop. Perhaps in his mind, police officer equals power, because to some extent, it is true. A lot of cops, they're on a fucking power trip. They think they're above the civilians. They can do a lot of things that the civilians can't. So he applied to become a state trooper, but he got rejected. And the reason why he got turned down was not because of the criminal record. You would think, yeah, because he was a murderer. He killed both of his grandparents. That's why he couldn't become a cop. No. And by the way, his criminal record got expunged later. What the fuck, right? Yeah. It was not because of that. The reason why he got rejected was because of his extreme physique. Like I said before, he was 6 feet 9 inches tall, weighed 300 pounds. Like, he's a fucking Viking. Obviously, I know there's a minimum requirement, but I didn't know there was actually a maximum reach. I thought when it comes to becoming a cop, the taller, the bigger, the better. But apparently I thought it wrong. Although he was rejected from being a state trooper, but he accepted the position at the Department of Transportation. So in a way, he is still in that loop. Like, he might not be a cop, but he's still in that system. You get what I'm saying? As he drove around California, he noticed a lot of female hitchhikers. Back in the 70s, the 80s, hitchhiking was a phenomenon because of a mix of culture, economics, social trust, practicality. It was liberating. It was hippie, adventurous. The shared experience was common among the younger generations, and young people rejected materialism. They thought it was authentic, just hitting the road with their thumbs up and hop on random strangers' cars, traveling to music festivals or cross-country trips. And for those of you who are struggling to fathom, why would this hitchhiking become a thing in America? So the United States is a nation built around cars. Unless you live in New York, where public transportation is widely used, otherwise, it's nearly impossible to get by without a vehicle. And when I said New York, I'm not even talking about the whole New York state. I only meant a couple of places like Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan. That does not include other boroughs, other districts like the Bronx, Staten Island, nor other places like Long Island, the upstate New York. It is absolutely bonkers to me. In the United States, a car is a necessity. It is before getting a TV, getting a refrigerator, getting a washing machine. I've seen people, they drive their own car to a laundromat and wash their clothes using a public washing machine. But the hitchhiking culture died down after the 80s due to crime spikes. And Ed kept giving rides to these girls, and he had picked up more than 100 girls, and nothing bad ever happened. He was simply just using that experience for him to test the water. He was trying to practice, how to strike up a conversation, how to talk to them, to make them feel comfortable enough to open up to him, to let their guard down. He just couldn't suppress the urge to kill. And in later interview, someone asked him what comes to his mind when he saw a pretty girl. He said, "One side of me says, wow, what an attractive chick. I like to talk to her, date her. And the other side of me says, I wonder how her head will look on a stick." On May 7th, 1972, Ed picked up two girls from Fresno State, Mary and Anita. They were both 18, and he drove them to a wooded area and intended to rape them. But he panicked, so he ended up choking and stabbing them to death. He then stuffed them in the back trunk and just went home. And on the way to his place, he was actually stopped by a cop for a broken taillight, but the cop didn't check the trunk. And if he had, he would probably be apprehended right then there. Probably not. With his physique, the cop would probably be dead too. What do you think? Over the next several hours, he did some post-mortem violation, desecration such as dismembering, decapitation, and necrophiliac activities to the corpse. And he then used a Polaroid camera. He captured numerous pictures of the severed heads, mutilated body, preserving these images as trophies for his own psychological gratification. He then wrapped the severed heads and the remaining body parts in plastic and scattered them across various isolated locations. Mary and Anita were his first hitchhiker kill. And just like that, he continued his murder spree. On September 14th, 1972, he picked up another girl, a 15-year-old Aiko, who missed her bus to her dance class. And as he drove toward a highway, Aiko became suspicious and frightened by the route he was taking because it wasn't the route to the dance class. So Aiko began reacting in panic. Ed had to stop the cart over to the side of the road in a very rural area. And then he utilized his physical force to overpower her. And just imagine the distinction between a guy who's 200 centimeters tall versus a petite 15-year-old dancer. He then choked her unconscious, raped and murdered her. After stuffing her body in the back of the trunk, he looked on his latest kill with pride. He said he's admiring his catch like a fisherman. And meanwhile, he was hanging out at a local bar called the Jewelry Room, which was popular among all the police officers. So he was friends. He was drinking with all the cops when they were off duty, and everybody adored him. They even gave him a nickname. They called him Big Ed. So basically, he infiltrated himself into the enemy's nest, so that way he can always be one step ahead of them. And at this point, the whole town was in panic mode. Dead bodies, mutilated remains were being discovered every single week. And upon investigation, the police had found out that there was a terrifying discrepancy. Because originally, the police actually had a nickname for this hitchhiking killer. They called him the co-ed killer because all the victims were young female students and mostly college students, but that was the pattern. But lately, more victims have been discovered, and some victims were died from a gunshot, and some victims got killed by blunt objects. Different genders, different age, the whole demographic was off, the whole pattern was off. And you know why? Get this, because there's a second prolific killer in this town. So the killing of EdmundKemper and another serial killer overlapped and coincidentally occurred at the same time window, created this phenomenon called the signal distortion or investigative noise. And this completely cross-contaminated the geographic jurisdiction and interfered the whole investigation. Meet Herbert Mullum. We're not going to get into specifics. I'm going to briefly talk about him and only focus on the overlapping chaos and how his presence interfered the whole investigation. So Herbert Mullum, he was also one of the notorious serial killers in the United States, and he confessed to killing 13 people. Yeah, so basically he believed there was an apocalypse, an earthquake that's gonna destroy California. And the only way to stop this earthquake is to kill. On February 5th, 1973, EdmundKemper killed two roommates, Rosalind and Alice. Then he decapitated them. He buried their heads in his mother's garden because, according to him, Clarnell always wanted people to look up to her. Yeah, he really hated her. And then he discarded their torsos and limbs out to Eden Canyon Road near Castro Valley. On February 12th, the skeletal remains of Herbert Mullen's victim, Mary, were discovered by the police. And just 2 days later, they also discovered the torsos and limbs from Rosalind and Alice. It was until when Herbert Mullen got arrested the next day, then he confessed to several specific killings. Then the police asked him about all the decapitated co-eds washing up on beaches or found in ravines. Then he was like, the fuck? That wasn't me. I didn't do it. And it was then the police finally realized, oh, there were 2 serial killers. 2 months later, on the 20th of April, EdmundKemper bludgeoned Clarnell to death with a claw hammer when she was sleeping. He then decapitated her head, raped her severed head before using her head as a dartboard. What the fuck? He also cut out her tongue and larynx and placed them into a garbage disposal, but the mechanism couldn't break up the tissue properly, so it spit her remains back into the sink. That seemed appropriate, as much as she bitched and screamed and yelled at me for so many years, he said. He then invited Clarnell's best friend, Sally, over to the house and murdered her, stole her car. He came up with this elaborate cover story. Clarnell had gone on a vacation with Sally. And then he ran up to Colorado, thinking the police is probably going to find out about everything in a couple of days and hunt his ass down. Well, I guess they were just too busy drinking at the jewelry room. They didn't find shit. So he ended up calling the police by themselves. So he called the police on the phone booth and confessed to everything. And at first, no one believed him. Because everybody liked him. No one believed this affable, easygoing, big Ed goofball would ever do such heinous crime, being a murderer, let alone a cold-blooded serial killer. And it was until Ed started sharing all the details that only the co-ed killer and the police would know that they finally took him serious. And when they asked him why he stopped killing and turned himself in, he said it wasn't serving any physical or real or emotional purpose. It was just purely waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. Why don't I believe this? EdmundKemper was arrested and later convicted of 8 counts of first-degree murder. And he tried to kill himself twice and even asked for death penalty, but that was not possible because the capital punishment was not allowed in California at the time. So instead, he was given 7 concurrent life sentences in 1973. He was imprisoned at the California Medical Facility alongside with other notorious serial killers like Charles Manson, Herbert Mullen. He is 77 years old today. Yes, he's still alive. And during his early years behind bars, he gave numerous interviews to journalists and law enforcement. He even held meetings with FBI agents to discuss his heinous crimes and all the motives behind his killings. And for decades, the FBI, alongside with all the psychologists worldwide, has studied him extensively, using his case as a typical reference to explore psychological root causes for other criminals' violent behaviors. On July 2024, he got denied parole at a hearing, and his next chance of parole is slated for 2031. Over the years, he has garnered reputation for being a model prisoner, and he has spent 5,000 hours narrating audiobooks. So if you're someone who listens to a lot of audiobooks, the chance of his voice gotten into your ears before is pretty high. What does that mean he's changed? Some people knew Ed personally doubt that he's changed at all. And I tend to agree because here's the thing. I think personality and characteristic might shift over time, shaped by life experience and traumatic events, but a person's core essence will never change. That stays true for all of us. What do you think? We always scramble for reasons why they kill. A bad childhood, trauma, mental illness, societal failings. When we list up all the hardships, it seems like we're softening the act itself, right? Oh, they were abused, so that's why they killed. They went through this, and that. That's why they grew up to be fucked up. All the excuses, they don't erase the lives they took. Trauma doesn't turn someone into a killer. Most people who suffer terribly didn't walk around hurting or killing others. Right? The why can never fully explain the what, because the what is a choice, even if brokenness made that choice feel like inevitable to them. And that, my friend, is the case of the co-ed killer, EdmundKemper. What do you think? I would like to hear your thoughts, and definitely let me know in the comment section. And as always, be safe, be vigilant, and take care.